What is happening, superfans? You're listening to Behind the Mask, the show where we chat with your favorite superhero fiction authors about the worlds and heroes they are writing. Behind the Mask is brought to you in conjunction with the amazing folks over at superherofiction.com. I'm your host, Franklin Kendrick, and today on the show, we are pleased to welcome author Karen Diem to the podcast.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. So first off, toughest question. You can answer, as much or as vague as you want for mystery. But when you're not a superhero,
I am mysterious.
So when you're not a superhero behind the keyboard, who are you?
Well, I suppose I could say, to use a term that somebody tried to popularize a long time ago and it never worked, so of course I've latched onto it, I am a domestic goddess. I am a mom, and mostly that's it at the moment. I used to be a technical writer, specializing in internet stuff. And yeah, that's a technical term, internet stuff. Term's probably changed by now because it's been a few years, and if you're out of the business for like more than 3 months, you're like way behind unless you're taking expensive classes or something, or so I'm told.
Mm-hmm. So basically you make everything run pretty much.
Yeah, most of my time is house stuff, and I fit in the writing whenever I can. There used to be a lot more writing fitting in before the whole corona thing and the child home constantly needing to be homeschooled, but you do what you can. And hey, it's preferable. I mean, what's not preferable to dead people all over the streets? I mean,
Oh, gee. Well, the one good thing is you don't have to worry about telling kids, hey, you make sure you're in the house by like 8 p.m. It's like they're already here. They haven't even gone anywhere.
My kid's still elementary school age, so she's not allowed to just like wander.
Mm-hmm.
If she were a bit older, it'd be more like, yeah, you need to be home by sunset or home by 6 or whatever for dinner. But she's young enough where she's not allowed to wander. So when she was home from school, she was home.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now she's home all the time.
One thing I have noticed
lighting up our lives with her wit and opinions on everything.
Oh, yes. I say one thing I have noticed with creative people with children, and like I don't have kids, but I do have like very young siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when I go home to visit on the weekends, it's like you do realize like you are their like personification of like old school Google. So they will come to you for like every single question. I'm like, I just don't know the answer to that right now. Or I'm not even in the right frame of mind to help you with this. Like, why are you trying to make cookies right now? Please.
Yeah. Or questions where really they should know the answer better than you. Like, Mom, where's my red Lego?
Where'd you last see it?
Isn't it with all the rest of your Legos? A number of which are red?
Yeah, exactly.
No, because then I wouldn't be asking you. Like, oh, starting that early, are we?
Oh my gosh. That's when you like overturn every piece of furniture and it's like behind the heaviest piece of furniture.
Well, I'm not that good a mom. I'm kind of like, okay, well, you get down and you check under the furniture, and I will check on the furniture, and we didn't find it, so I'll make sure I check the vacuum really well next time I vacuum in here, because I got stuff to do. I have somebody dangling off a cliff right now. I really can't.
Exactly.
I did actually dangle someone off a cliff in one of my short stories, but that's been out for a while.
So I say, speaking of writing, this is a two-part question for you. What got you into writing in the first place? And then what drew you to working in the superhero fiction genre?
I've always kind of been a writer. Even before I bothered to write things down, I was sitting there telling myself stories, in part to keep myself amused. I'm the oldest in a big family.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of babysitting involved, which is why cartoons influence me perhaps more than might be healthy. But I prefer to think of it as a charming quirk. Um, but so I was pretty much always telling stories. And then I got to like writing them down. I think my gift for Christmas one year from my dad is he found like this ancient manual typewriter. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
like seriously manual. There was no, you don't plug it in at all.
Mhm.
You know, it had to use like these big clunky ribbons, and every time you type something, it like practically cuts through the ribbon. And yeah, so I got that I think in high school, and that's when I started writing stuff down. Unfortunately, it was mostly really bad Star Trek fan fiction at that point.
Oh.
Happily, most of that has been lost to the ages, though every now and again I will find an 8.5, 11 piece of very battered paper where the letters are like coming through on the other side and everything is like 0.75 spaced because that was the spacing set on my typewriter and I couldn't figure out how to make it
Oh my gosh.
be be like regular single spaced. And yeah, and I'll be like, oh, look at this, it's my old writing, and oh my god, this must never see the light of day again.
Yeah, there's like a comfort when it's only been printed once. It's never been
Yeah.
uploaded to the internet. So no
Yeah,
one
you
has
don't have
seen
to
this.
worry that someone's going to go through your trash, pick up a disc, and go, this could have important personal data. And instead, they're like, and what happened? This is terrible.
Oh my gosh. So typewriter question, since I also uh, I started out with a typewriter, luckily, and it still sort of works, but it's like been handed down to like younger people that want to play around with it. Do you have like a nostalgia for the sound of it, or is it like does it not do anything?
It made my fingers bleed because it was that stiff and I was typing
Mhm.
that much. So, not really. I was so happy when I finally got to type stuff up on a computer, and it was like, it doesn't hurt at all
It's
to type. This is wonderful.
like
You know, and I
luxury.
don't have to try and use that white stuff to cover over the letters when I spell something wrong and need to fix it because it must be fixed.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And if you try to type over it, it leaves like a terrible like indent in the whiteout.
Hmm. Yeah,
Ugh,
and sometimes it like lifts up the whiteout, so next time you type with that letter, you get like only part of it because it's transferring white goop.
ugh. Like I don't know how they did it back in the day. Like,
Yeah, so I'm pretty happy not to be using a typewriter anymore. Though I will admit I do have I, a manual keyboard
oh, okay.
for my computer. It's a lot easier on my wrists and fingers, and it doesn't hurt because, or it helps because it requires a little more pressure than some
Mhm.
of the you just barely tap them ones. And having learned to type on this typewriter, I hit the keyboard a little harder than some of the more delicate keyboards really handle well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that. As far as superheroes specifically, I thought I was doing something original because I was like, what if, and this was just like one of those watching TV, farting around, doing whatever, reading. What kind of superhero would have all the skills necessary to be a superhero without actually trying to be a superhero. You know, like how would Batman have gotten all those skills if he weren't fixated on vengeance and becoming this force running around in the dark? You know, that sort of thing. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, I should not write this book about this woman that I've come up with, because I am 80,000 words into this like urban fantasy psychic detective mystery thing. And then I spent 5 years writing the first in my Arca series. But as I was sitting there going, okay, I'm actually serious about this book, I need to do some research. I started looking online for resources, and somebody on, I think it was Keyboards, actually mentioned there was a superhero category on Amazon. And I was like, seriously? That's pretty cool. And they're like books, not comic books, because I was not writing comic books because I cannot draw. Any creativity I have does not express itself in my drawing, other than when you're sitting there going, oh, that's a very interesting collection of not straight lines. You know. And then I found like the superhero novel category, and I started reading everything that was on Kindle Unlimited because I'm pretty much voracious reader. So Darius Brasher, I think some Michael Bailey, everybody who was around back in like 2014, 2015, when I was starting to look at actually publishing my stuff. Because up until then, I was like, well, I guess I'll have to call it like urban fantasy because there's no superhero category. Silly me.
Yeah. Well, the joke is now all the urban fantasy calls itself superhero stuff, so it's worked the opposite way. There's so much crossover.
Yeah, well, I mean, mine is something of an urban fantasy crossover, so it could work either way. But yeah, there's a fair amount of books that I would not have described as superhero in the superhero category, but we all know how most superhero authors feel about that. So
yeah, it's like if only, like there's no amount of control. Really, a person browsing, looking specifically for superhero stuff, I feel like they'll be able to figure it out which one is and which one's not.
Yes, once they actually type in like the word superhero or something like that, they'll be able to find superhero books. But just browsing through the categories like I was doing, going, they said there's a superhero. Oh my goodness, here it is. And there's like so much stuff here. I hope I'm not like writing the same thing everyone else is.
That's always the trick. It's like really there's been so many times where I've had ideas and then like a week later somebody else has already had that idea. So it's like you can't be too hard on yourself, but you just have to like accept that there isn't really anything original. The original part is like your take on something.
Oh, I absolutely agree. My books are my take on things. And I actually lean into a number of tropes, particularly those that have been exploited in cartoons or overexploited in cartoons, because, like I said, there were a lot of kids, and really, when you've only got a few channels, it's generally going to be whatever the little kids are allowed to watch. Which is probably good because I didn't really care for like my dad's choices, which were more like Vietnam movies and football. Like, yeah, no, there's a bunch of dudes running around. They're wearing shoulder pads and helmets and tight pants. They don't look quite right, but okay, whatever. Oh, there's a ball involved. Okay.
Yeah, long gaps of standing around and waiting for stuff to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you are used to constantly going, okay, one, two, three, four. Okay, where's the rest of the kids? Where's the rest of the kids? And the baby's running down the street naked. Gotta go. That actually happened.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
at one point, I was watching uh, two of the youngest batch, and they were like 3 and 4, something like that.
It's like prime running age.
Yeah, and I was in the kitchen making like sandwiches or something for our lunch, and one of my other slightly younger than me siblings, but from the older batch, was supposed to be, keeping a rough eye on the little ones, and while I made lunch, and I come out with the sandwiches, I put them on the table, and I'm like, "Where's the kids?" And she's like, "Huh? Like, where are the girls?" And I look by the door. There's like a discarded diaper
Yeah.
and a little heap of clothes. I go to the front door. I look out. There's another heap of clothes that I recognize as being the other child. I run out the front door. I look one way. I see one little bare bottom disappearing over a hill. I look the other direction. I see the other bare bottom disappearing down the street. Opposite directions, running middle of the street. And I'm like, seriously? 5 minutes.
All it takes.
So I got lucky, and one of my friends happened to recognize the naked child running past her house and grabbed that one, and I had gone after the littler one
Mhm.
with the reasoning of she's shorter, it'll be harder for cars to see her, and I have a slightly better chance of
Oh my
tucking her under
gosh.
my arm and sprinting up the hill, or walking rapidly and panting a lot
Yeah.
because I wasn't full grown or anything at that point, um, to catch the other one who might get distracted by some of the yard art that's
Yeah.
up that direction, you know.
Oh
But
my gosh.
so yeah, I'm kind of not very good at watching something like football where you're supposed to be focused on it and waiting and waiting and just watching for some little thing to happen. I'm more likely to be like, oh, is anybody hungry? I'm going to get some food.
Yeah.
I'm going to get this book here. Have they won yet? No. Okay. I'm going to go back to, oh, no, that's over there. Put that over there. Okay. Now back to my book. But with the superhero stuff, to go all the way back to what we were supposed to be talking about, um, I discovered the superhero novel section of Amazon and was pretty happy that there were other books there, and there's like a real category I could put it in, and it's like, oh well, maybe there's like an actual market for it. It'll be more than just like me, my family, and like one or two people who are like, oh, this looks interesting. I'm really
Mhm.
bored. I'll pick this up. There's no pictures. It's not a comic book. Yeah, I've got time. you know, I didn't have big expectations for that first book.
But I would say it must have done good enough because now it's on like 5 books, I believe. I saw.
I am writing book 6 right now. So yeah, the first book actually did really well. I almost got the number one slot
Wow.
in the superhero category with that one, and I think what happened was that I was accidentally listed on a list of best-selling novels on like a San Francisco newspaper or something.
Oh wow.
Because I wasn't really advertising because I came in total novice to the author business. And I was kind of like, well, I only have the one book. It doesn't really make sense to mark it down with only one book.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'll pay for like this one $20 ad and cross my fingers.
Yeah.
And I know it didn't come from that ad because the ad went out and I got like 15 sales or something like that for the day of that ad. And then like a week later, it's like, well, I sold 300 books today. What? Yeah,
That's like a fun surprise to like wake
yeah.
up
That
to.
that was an awesome surprise. Um, One I wish I saw more often, but
Yes, it's like the mystery of like how did people find my book if I'm not advertising or
I'm a
it's a
complete unknown. This is my first book. It has terrible reviews because I got hit with like 5 negative reviews right away. I don't feel all of them were merited, but I am completely and totally biased.
Mhm,
Um, but yeah, when people start buying, I'm like, oh crap. Okay, well, I will fix the stuff that I legit agree with the reviews was wrong and put out another version. Because if people are really buying this, I mean, I had rushed it out without sending it through an editor because I had an elderly family member that I had been told she was really sick. And I was like, oh, but she's always been so supportive of
mhm,
me writing a book. I want to publish a book before she passes.
mhm.
So I went and I published it, and I'm like, well, nobody's going to see it anyway. I can always, I'm a pretty good editor from all those years of the technical writing. It shouldn't be too bad.
Mhm.
Um, it, it wasn't the worst book I've seen, but it definitely did need somebody to go through and do all that line editing stuff. And it might have been slightly overwritten, but
First books I feel like are always like the first there's a lot of writing that goes like that only you will see before you feel comfortable tackling like an actual book. But then like the first book that I put out was total garbage and I felt so bad because I really truly believed it was amazing and I had written so much before then that
mhm.
afterwards I was just like this is coming down. I'm not I like
Well,
I
my
really
book
had a
one
lot more to
is
learn.
still up. It's still a bit overwritten. Um, I like to think that it's a real treat for people who are fans of the Tolkien-esque style of description, where you know what, you want to know what that room looks like. You
Mhm.
know what that room looks like.
Yeah.
For those who are not as big of a fan of that much description, I've been paring it down in later books.
Mhm.
Because really it was more of a, I'm giving too many details that readers don't necessarily need. I mean, do
Mhm.
they really care if she has plants in her exercise room? Not so much,
Well,
you know.
there probably
Um,
was a time where it was I feel like when novels were like the giant like luxurious form of entertainment, it was like expected to be written that way and I wish it hadn't turned into such a like make sure everything counts, make sure it's all absolutely crucial because sometimes when I read older books like it just flows so nicely and it really like transports you more than like a modern day like it's a brisk 250 pages like it's its own art form really.
it is, and I had been a fantasy and sci-fi reader
Mhm. Oh
primarily.
boy, so like you're probably used to
So
like door stoppers of some sort.
yeah, super is like 102,000 words, and it's
Wow.
not my biggest book. My biggest book, I think, was Power, which was around 120K words. That's the third in my series. It actually has less extraneous description, but there was a lot of description required for that book because I took it from my usual setting to at least part of the book is set in Brazilian rainforest type area.
Mhm.
And you can't just go, and the jungle was jungly.
Yeah. It doesn't cut it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, is this creepy jungle? Is this like Disney jungle? Yeah. So, and there are things where it's just not quite the same as it would be in the US. So you have to kind of slip those in there so that it flows right.
Hmm.
Um, but I forgot what we were talking about.
I'm looking. I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, oh, okay. So you sort of answered my next question, which was, um, if your book was a series, um, could you give us a rundown of um, who your hero is, and if there's more than one, or even if they're not all heroes, a little bit about some of the other characters and what their relationships are like.
I like character driven. So while the books are third person limited and they focus on a sole viewpoint, that of my main character, Zeta Garcia, she does actually work as part of a team with a couple of good friends from her teenage years. They were all in an experimental cancer program together. And they kind of have this sibling slash friend thing going on, though they lost touch for a number of years. Um, so you have Zeta, who is my main character, as I said. She is an adrenaline junkie. She does like tax accounting because it leaves her most of the year to like follow her other interests, and she like picks up work
Hmm.
doing other stuff. She works out like crazy. She's a failed Olympic athlete. She's very physical, not terribly good with people. Um, as in, there's a trail of people she's alienated. Not on purpose, because, you know, she means well, but yeah, they're just things that you shouldn't say, and she says them.
Hmm.
Um, but she does work on a three-person team. They consider themselves vigilantes, or at least she considers them vigilantes. The second member of the team is Andrew Cristovano. He's a he is trying to think what I can say. For most of the series, he is a grad student and postdoc
Okay.
student so far of physics. Um, he is the geeky member of the team who's going to make the Avengers references and the Spider-Man references and all the anime references and, you know, all the fun stuff that Zeta has no clue about because she's basically not watched television or very little television ever, and what she has watched has generally been in another country or in another language.
Hmm.
So she doesn't have all those cultural references. Well, Andy does. So I can use him to make those references. He's kind of the bedrock of the group, so to speak. And the third member of the group is Win um, Win Diamond. She is a reference librarian at a university graduate library, specializing in religious studies, specifically um, witchcraft and Wicca and alternative religions. And she's a fervent believer in Wicca. And she's the social butterfly of the group.
Hmm.
She has all of the graces that Zeta lacks. Um, but these are her two best friends. And when it's a very minor spoiler, but I think I spoil it on the back of the books or whatever. Wynn is basically a telepathic witch. Andy
Oh,
is
okay.
a brick, and that is a Superman type. Um, and then Zeta is a teleporting shapeshifter.
Okay.
So the three of them are pretty flexible about where they can pop up and what they can do. Um, Part of books 2 and 3, I had some pretty major subplots where Zeta was just learning to deal with her friends again.
Hmm.
Because you're not the same person as an almost 30-year-old that you were when you were like 13 or 14.
Hmm.
I mean, there's pieces of you that are the same, and maybe you still click with your old friends, but you still got to learn to adapt and deal with each other. So, like, book 2 is a lot of Zeta and Wynn as two very opposite women learning to deal with each other, in addition to the superhero plot,
Hmm.
which was the primary plot, was the superhero stuff. And then book 3, Andy's having some troubles, and Zeta's trying to deal with him, and be a good friend to him. But again, she can't use everything she's learned from Wynn, and
Hmm.
she can't just handle it the way she'd like to. So it's pretty character driven that way, in that I do have them trying to work together and learn how to work together. Um, there is some commentary about people who run off on their own and split the party. Uh, that sort of thing
Hmm.
has to be dealt with. So those are my primary characters, I would say. I've got a number of supporting cast. Um, I've got the mysterious possible anti-hero guy. I've got the wacky chick who I swear I wrote before Harley Quinn became big. I mean, Quinn existed first, but I wrote this character before Harley Quinn became what she is now.
Yeah.
Um, I've got my villains, of course. I've got a nice little rogues gallery going on,
Ooh.
that sort of thing. Classic superhero rogues gallery. Um, Zeta, of course, I get to have her make comments like, "Why is he talking?" I mean, he's kind of got everyone where he wants them, but he's just talking. So I'm just gonna go punch him while he's talking, and people are like, "That's so rude.
Yeah.
He's
She's like,
talking." And
she's the outsider who doesn't obey the trope rules.
yeah, she doesn't obey the trope rules. Andy knows all the trope rules, and it's like, oh my god, he's monologuing. This is so cool. I never thought anybody would actually monologue. What are you doing, Zeta? You're punching. Okay, we're moving. you know, um, when as a librarian is more up on her Austen than her X-Men,
Hmm.
um, but she still has enough of an idea of popular movies and stuff to be like, you're you do it your way, Zeta.
Yeah. I like that. I like that dynamic. Um, it reminds me of it's not a superhero thing, but it reminds me a lot of like some of my favorite characters. Like I love like the Brendan Fraser mummy movies. And I
Hmm.
like how it's just like sometimes you want to like chisel away with the delicate instrument and it's like really just let me take the crowbar to it. It will get it done so quickly. And it's like fine, you can do it. You can do it that way if you want. If it makes you happy, I'll give it up for you.
Yeah, and I mean they have certain things that they're in agreement on. My series is a little lighter. It is not meant to be gritty. It's meant to be kind of realistic, but there
Hmm.
is a heavy dose of Murphy's Law in there, so things can be kind of tongue in cheek,
Hmm.
especially if certain characters are on screen.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, they agree on certain things, like they try not to kill anyone, and they try to minimize the amount of damage they do to the surrounding area.
Mhm.
Sometimes they don't have a choice because, if somebody throws Andy into, say, an underpass and he breaks it with his butt,
Oh,
there's
right.
nothing he could really do about that. That
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
But, um, but yeah, sometimes they're trying to figure out which tool to use, and they have such different toolboxes. Zeta actually has a lot of skills. Um, she works part time as a locksmith for her brother, so she can do a lot of locks and stuff.
mhm,
Um, so they don't necessarily depend on Andy kicking down walls and charging into a room, which I always felt was not terribly realistic.
yeah,
Though I do have it happen some in my series, just not so much with Zeta and company.
yeah. There's always a good time for stealth and getting in and getting out without being detected.
There is, and there is a time for the Kool-Aid Man entrance.
Mhm.
But for those of you who don't get that reference, the Kool-Aid Man would basically kick down a wall and come through the opening while shouting his own name. Um, but there are times for that entrance, and it's not necessarily the choice that someone would make, especially someone who's not familiar with that being a trope of superheroes where they're just busting through walls all over the place. So you
Yeah,
just like, don't pick up the car and throw it at them. That's somebody's car. That might be
yeah,
their only transportation. Are you kidding me? You
yeah,
know, um, she probably wouldn't say only means of transportation. She might be that might be their only way of getting places. Um,
yeah. That is
you
one
know,
thing that always bugged me about some of the movies. Not so much recent, well, maybe within like the last like 5 or 6 years, but there are some movies where they went over the top with like spectacle,
mhm.
and the heroes would save like three people, and then you look in the background and it's like, well, judging by the amount of cars that just got thrown through the air and smashed, probably like 50 people are going to be killed or sent to the ER, but you saved those three people, so good for you. What
Yeah, I'm
about
I'm I'm
the
not a fan of the senseless NPC deaths. I do
Mhm.
kill off people in my series. I do have some horrible things happen to people. I don't generally go into depth on those things, um, but I mean, there were scenes in movies that shall remain nameless, more than one movie, where, say, someone gets thrown through an office building in such a way that would probably bring down at least the top of that office building, if not the entire building. And
Mhm.
it's like, why are you having your punch fest here if you guys know you're going to be doing this much damage? Why are you not out in the middle of nowhere where if you wreck somebody's farm, you can go to the farmer and say, look, I'm super sorry I messed up your farms. Hook me up to a plow.
Yeah.
I'll redo all your fields,
Yeah, it would be
and
sensible.
something sensible like that. And I just don't care for that because it's like all those NPCs are wasted.
Yeah,
That's senseless depth just because you want to have something blow up or look, glass is shattering. Yeah, I get it's a cool visual.
yeah. So much glass, Jeff.
So much glass. You
I
know,
love
uh,
it.
offices with glass where I've never seen offices with glass, and I've worked in a lot of offices.
Yeah,
Um, you know, uh, it's like, let's just not. I'm writing this, so I get to pick. All right,
you get to decide.
I get to decide. So there's no radiation giving people superpowers either.
Oh, okay. What? So what? This is like a tag to the question about your heroes. Are you able to say how, like, what gives them their abilities, or is that considered like a spoiler for you?
That would pretty much be a spoiler because I've been dragging it out across the series.
Okay.
Um,
So
my
so
my
that's like
main
an overall
characters
mystery.
don't know.
Okay.
The world in general doesn't know. They have a couple theories, and some of those theories have been mentioned. I do have a unified theory behind it. Um, it is vaguely scientific if you squint and accept that the except that deflector dishes can be reconfigured.
Hmm.
You know,
Okay.
um, but it's not explicitly stated because again, my characters don't exactly know. I did give them a little bit of. I did drop some information on that in book 5, Toga, um, where it's like, yeah, here's some information from previous generations that maybe you didn't even know about.
Okay.
That sort of thing. So I did give a little more in there, and it might come up again in future books. Probably book 7 might have a tiny bit, but they'd be looking at it from a non-science perspective. Book 9 maybe, or 8 might have some more. Um, so yeah, I'm planning at least 9.
I love a good like overall mystery. So that
Yeah,
that is enticing.
yeah. I have a lot of. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world of Arca. Um, any of my stories actually that don't feature Zeta as the main character are considered Arca's world
Mhm.
because they're all in the same world, obviously. But the world continues without her participation, and she's not scientifically minded. She's not necessarily a why do I have cool superpowers. She's more of a what? I'm even more awesome now. Watch me do
Yeah.
this. I mean, come on, Mono, you got to see this. This is awesome. You know. Um,
Like you gave it to me, I'm gonna use it.
oh yeah, no, I mean she got superpowers, and her reaction to it was, well, I can't control them. That sucks. Obviously, I need to train myself.
Mhm.
And once I have trained it, it will be super awesome because now I don't have to pay for airfare to go places. I don't have to do all this stuff. I can do so much of the stuff that I've always wanted to do. I
Mhm.
can just fly up that mountain and jump off the top, and I don't have to pay for the expensive gear that I can't afford. You know,
Yeah.
um, like I said, adrenaline junkie. Basically handed a free ticket to the entire world.
Not bad.
You
For
know,
speaking of the world that your characters live in, is it based on just like our actual reality, or is part of it like fictional? What is the deal with it?
it is a slightly different version of our Earth. The major differences between my Earth and our Earth happened in the 70s when there was an initial wave of superheroes that Zeta is not part of. Um, but there were a number of things that just went differently and affected different regions. The
Okay.
U.S. is mostly the same, but like Pol Pot, his genocide was never as bad as it was in our in reality, uh, because there was a super
Okay.
who objected. So now there's Cambodia, and there's the plant lady's place, which is like her own little country, you know. And there's Laos and Vietnam and all those other countries, but it's just there's just this chunk of what is currently Cambodia in our world, northeastern Cambodia, I believe. They have a really nice. They really listen to me. They have a really nice divider, like they did it on purpose. But they have like a chunk of their country where there's a major river, and then it goes up into like highlands, and there's a lot of that section is pretty isolated from the rest of the country. That's no longer Cambodia
Okay.
in my universe, so that's like one of the changes. And Chernobyl is not as bad, and then um, So there's just a number of things where supers intervened and it came out differently.
Hmm.
Some things are the same. Um, Politician names, for some reason, will definitely not be the same. But you'll
So is
still
it
get some of the same pop culture names and references.
okay? So were
Uh,
some of the changes, the alternate history changes that you made, were they ones that you just like would have liked something to end up that way, or was it just kind of like a pick and choose to make a timeline work for what you were going for?
some of them were some of them were things where when I was thinking about, okay, I have this previous generation. What happened to them? What did they accomplish? How did they impact the world
Hmm.
when they showed up? By the time Zeta gets her powers, they're all believed to be dead or missing, with the possible exception of the plant lady, but nobody really knows because you don't really go in her country unless you live there.
Hmm.
Um, so some of it was just a natural growth of, okay, well, um, superheroes in my world are not simply a US thing, so let's look at all the major centers of population. I'm going to give superheroes to all these areas roughly spread out somewhat evenly across the world. What are some of the changes that they brought in?
Hmm.
The plant lady is the most obvious there, but there are other ones where, yes, I am doing stuff where I wish it had happened differently in our reality. Um, Trying to think what I can say without spoilering. Somebody invented landmine robots from the 70s, supers. Because you know
Oh.
you got your techno talent,
Hmm.
of course. You always
Yeah.
have the techno talent in any
Yeah.
superhero roster. Um, and he invented landmine robots, and they basically wander around war torn areas, getting rid of landmines and that sort of thing. So
That would
there's a lot
be
less of that,
the
and there's a lot less of the lingering horror
yes.
um, in countries where there were a lot of landmines and people are still tripping over them,
Hmm.
even though the war was however many generations ago.
Hmm. I like that. I like that kind of because I feel like a lot of alternate history is like
They go
replacing
dark.
one terrible thing with like a different version of a terrible thing. And it's like, oh
Yeah,
come
they
on,
go
no.
dark. I have things called snark balls. SNARC, but
Okay.
it sounds like snark, with reason. Uh, Because yes, I am totally going to pull a joke in my books if I can.
Oh, of
But yeah,
course.
I have these things called snark balls, which are clean energy,
Hmm.
and one snark ball is sufficient to power New York City.
Okay.
So they are very powerful. They're also um, they're also relatively stable. They don't explode. They don't have byproducts. They don't. Um, One could almost say they're mysteriously super efficient.
Mhm.
Um, but there was one of those in Japan, so the tsunami didn't destroy the nuclear factory there because there was no nuclear factory. They had a snark ball because Japan is an early adapter of really cool technology.
Oh, cool.
In that particular plant, they didn't have a snark ball, or they didn't have nuclear. They had snark ball, so that whole area is still good, and you didn't have that horrible tragedy there. And it's like, you
Hmm.
know what? If I'm going to change history, I'm gonna fix some of this stuff that
Yes.
just made me cry or was just so horrible. Um, yeah, there was some U.S. stuff, but a lot of the U.S. stuff is more political.
Hmm.
Um, or it was something where there isn't an easy answer, like Katrina. I didn't have a
Yeah.
super that could have stopped Katrina, and Katrina was also after the time period of the '70s supers,
Hmm.
because they really did most of their impacts in the '70s. Maybe the early '80s at latest, and maybe something trickled down, but most of their direct stuff would have been in that time period. So I looked at all the major world catastrophes and horrible things in the '70s and went, I'm fixing that one and
Hmm.
that one. And you know what? This riot didn't happen. And yeah. So, and then I tried to go, okay, now I fixed these things. What's the effect of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, enough of Chernobyl happened that you still got some of the nuclear reforms.
Hmm.
Because I think that was important. And you still had some other nuclear disasters that weren't averted, but I think Chernobyl was probably the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an alternate history version of Earth. I like to think it's a little better than ours simply because some of these horrible things didn't happen. Um, Cambodia is more of a force for technology. Um, that's for certain. But yeah, that's my Earth. It's our Earth. There's alternate history. Most of the history is relatively similar. You can kind of guess
Hmm.
that things traveled along very similar lines. The '80s still happened. Shoulder pads still happened, unfortunately. You know, um,
We can't get away from that now.
yeah. The There being superheroes certainly wouldn't stop Brexit or any of that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But there are differences, and most of the differences are a little more subtle. But I like to think that most of my '70s supers say left the world a little better
Hmm.
um, than it might have turned out.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
but
all
yeah,
you can hope
somewhere I have
for.
a list which I haven't looked at for a while of okay, these are the major events that either didn't happen or were corrected uh, by a super, so they weren't as bad, or a
Hmm.
super related thing. Um,
So you planned you your prose started out Tolkien-esque with the description. Also, he was like a major planner of everything with like boxes and drawers of outlines and timelines and all that jazz.
I'm a mix. I did a lot of world development in the early stages. Um, every book, I can't really do serious writing on it until I write an outline of roughly how the whole thing's going to go.
Mhm.
And I mean, some of those chapters normally towards the front are a lot more detailed, where this XYZ has to happen, but the main point of the chapter is whatever. And then like a middle or later chapter might be something like Zeta fights mid boss.
Mhm. Just
You
a
know,
general statement, just to be like, okay, you'll figure this, you'll figure the details
Zeta
out when you
fights
get
mid
here.
boss. Uh, Swing on the disco ball.
Yeah.
There we go. That's like the notes for a chapter that I happen to recall from Monster.
Mhm.
Um, but so I generally write an outline and I start writing all my chapters, and maybe I write one or two chapters before I finish my outline. Um, and then eventually I discard my outline and just go whatever direction towards my ending, which is normally about what I thought it would be when I started writing the outline. And then I go
Mhm.
back and I fix my outline so it matches what the story is turning into.
Yeah.
And I have a timeline program that I use so that in my gleeful writing and rewriting, um, I have a timeline at the end of each book that I update. So it's like, okay, these are all the dates that things happened, and that helps me to figure out, okay, well, first off, this book can't start until after this date because before this date there was a catastrophe.
Hmm.
I think there was a mudslide in Washington, and Toga couldn't start before that mudslide happened because my characters would do something to help the people
Hmm.
in the mudslide prior to opening the book. Um, but I do keep a timeline so I'm not having 6 things happen in one day where it's like, okay, you went to Europe and back again and you did like all this stuff. So your day comes out to like 98 hours,
Yeah.
which is something I would totally do because I'm kind of like, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this is a lot of fun. Oh, right, sleeping.
Yeah. Sleeping, eating. Those are.
Eating's not a problem. My main character's always hungry.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
her when you work out 5 or 6 hours a day,
Yeah, you kind of need to replace some calories.
yes, and you are like a 5 foot nothing woman. You can only eat so much at one time,
Yeah.
and so she's pretty much eating all day. Um, it's a running gag in the books that she's always hungry, and people are like, "Oh, she makes really good pie." Well, now we know how you know her.
Yeah.
You know, eating I have covered, but it's the sleeping that I'm like, okay, gotta leave her sleep time, or I've got to go and have her complain about not having any time to sleep and have her be cranky and I do actually do that in a couple books where she doesn't get to sleep or she only gets like a nap in and she's like, I'm so tired. I mean,
Oh
I have
yeah.
one book where we're coming up on the final few chapters and she's like napping. You know, they're like traveling somewhere and she's like, okay, we're on the way. Wake me when we get there.
Yeah. It's
Because she's
real.
been
It's
up at that
realistic.
point for like 2 days straight, and
Yeah.
she does not have a superpower that would allow her to bypass that. I mean, she's got good stamina because she's used to working out all the time, but she doesn't have superhuman stamina where it's like, I don't sleep, I
Yeah. You
don't
need your
eat,
cycle.
I only need sunlight to continue to exist. You know, or
Yeah.
something like. Yeah, no, she doesn't do that. She's got to sleep, she's got to eat, she's got to shower. Um, People will tell her sometimes that she needs to shower. I mean, she's a clean person, but don't get me wrong. But
Yeah.
there are a number of times where I'm just like, yeah, and you know what? She just came through this thing. People are going to be there and say things like, maybe you should shower first.
Yeah.
Speaking as your friend, you should shower first.
It's like you know I love you, but you should probably take care of that first.
Yeah, I think this is a horrible idea, but I recognize we're going to do it. But first, you shower.
Yeah.
Because if I have to hang out in close proximity to you, you need to shower first. You know. So
Yes.
I do have the everyday concerns coming in. She's always trying to make enough money.
Hmm.
You know, she's got her main job, which she almost lost. She's got her side hustle. She occasionally picks up another side hustle just to fill in some of the blanks because vigilantism isn't bringing her any money. And as a tax accountant, she is not accepting anything
Hmm.
that would bring the IRS down on her.
Yes.
Because I mean that's like one of the few forces that really frightens Zeta is the IRS. She's like,
Mhm.
oh no, I'm
No.
not going to mess with that.
Yeah.
I mean, how would I even claim that on my taxes? Here's a random $10,000 that I got being a secret vigilante. No.
Yeah.
And if I tried to call that something else, that would be laundering. And so no. So yeah, they don't generally bring in a lot of money, though I will say her friends do, or at least one of her friends may not have all the same scruples that she does.
Okay.
Um, just because being a vigilante is expensive.
Yeah, you have to keep up the lifestyle.
Yeah, and you have to pay for things, and it's better if you don't have this endless paper trail
Mhm.
of, well, um, Andy likes to wear capes. His capes are frequently destroyed, so
Yes.
you got to order these capes in bulk. How are you paying for that? Do you pay for that with your credit card, with your regular name? And then
Yeah.
people are like, we keep finding this Company X cape here. Let's see who's buying all these Company X capes.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So her friend's a little more pragmatic on that and just hasn't pushed it with Zeta. Um, it's only come up as like a couple side comments, so I don't know if anybody's even caught that. But
Mhm. Well,
but
maybe
yeah,
now they will. They'll go look
maybe
for
now they
it.
will. But yeah, one of her friends is using some money that they stumbled across accidentally in an
Okay.
early book. Everybody thought that was a throwaway. It wasn't.
There. See, you heard it. You heard it here first.
Yes, yes. I do generally set things up, and maybe I don't touch them for a couple books, but um, a lot of times I do have something in mind for um, at least major things. If it's part of a major scene,
Hmm.
there's a chance you'll see it again.
Very
Um,
cool. I like the tiny detail that you thought was such a throwaway. It came back to bite them in the end, or it's like it's a big thing that nobody was paying attention to.
oh yeah, no, I love pulling that sort of thing, especially if it can trip up my characters. Um, in book one, I start out the book with this blind date that goes really badly for Zeta,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy ends up with like a broken nose and some black eyes, and I mean it's technically not her fault, but she wasn't exactly sympathetic either. And she's like, "What were you doing, you idiot?" Well, you lay there and wait for somebody to tend you. I'm gonna go do something. You know,
Yeah.
um, like I said, she's not all that good with people.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
Well,
part of what I looked at with her was, okay, you have a girl who's at least partially raised by two young boys
mhm.
and like a sports coach.
Yeah. How are you going to realistically end up? You're not going to be asking for tea parties or whatever.
No,
You're going to
no.
stand up for yourself because you have to do it in your environment you were raised.
Yes, yeah. So, and I'm not saying I didn't kill off her entire family. She does have a living mother.
Hmm.
I will just say that real fast. But economics, mom wasn't around as much.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of her slightly older siblings trying to raise possibly hyperactive Zeta the best they could, and then the sports coach not helping. So
Yes. So I'm gonna go with that, I guess, and I'm gonna ask my next question for you. And you kind of mentioned it earlier on, But what were what were some of your inspirations for this series?
Really, everything. I mean, Sita being hyper, she got progressively more hyper as I was writing her because I was pregnant through part of the writing of book one.
Hmm.
And my daughter was one of those babies who's just always doing somersaults. And it's like, this child doesn't sleep. She's just like endlessly moving. That makes a lot of sense for this character I'm writing.
Hmm.
Hmm, okay. And then, fantasy novels, cartoons, and I do prefer the cartoons with a bit of humor to them. Batman, the Brave and the Bold, I think was
Hmm.
the name of it. That one was good. Justice League, before it became Justice League Unlimited,
Yeah.
was a good one. Um, Lynda Carter's Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's not that similar to Zeta because Wonder Woman is way better with people. Uh,
Yeah, she
but
has to.
but she was an influence.
Hmm.
But those are some of my influences on it. Like I said, fantasy in general.
Hmm.
Um, there was a lot of stuff where in fantasy where I was like, I'm not going to do that, and I set out to deliberately not do that. Um, I didn't want when I started writing my book to write about a teenage farm boy who
Hmm.
embarks on an adventure.
Yeah. That's like the fantasy equivalent of like I'm gonna write about a small town in the middle of nowhere, and the characters all find out they're somebody secretly. Their parents are not really their parents.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh
and
no.
I mean, in all fairness, I have seen a number of authors handle that particular trope very well,
Mhm.
and they write their characters very well. But that wasn't what I wanted. You
Yeah.
know, I knew I did not want to write a teenage farm boy, or even a teenage city boy. I also didn't want to write the geek who becomes a superhero trope,
Yeah.
who already knows everything about superheroes, and he's like, "Well, this is how it's done." It's like,
Hmm.
actually, I really like the idea of them not knowing anything about being a superhero. I think that's part of the tagline for the first books is, Zeta doesn't know a superhero from some guy in his pajamas.
Hmm.
Um, but and again, other people have done that and they've done it well, and I've enjoyed reading some of them, but it's not where I wanted to go.
Hmm. I think
So
it's
so there were
fun.
things that were like, I'm not going to do that. In
Yeah.
addition to, I like that, I want to do that. Star Trek, the original series, the Kirk Spock McCoy friendship, I really
Hmm.
like that. And
Yes.
I mean, I have my own trio. They do not neatly fit into a Kirk Spock McCoy. You can tell which one is which, but I really like that strong friendship there. And I knew that like the friendship would have to be not just all women.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to have a guy in there because I believe firmly that platonic friendships are possible
Hmm.
without everybody being gay.
Yes. It is. I mean, that is interesting. It's like a to go either way where it's all just a bunch of bros, it's all a bunch of ladies. It's like you risk
Or it's
being
like
like
two ladies and their gay friend, and it's
yeah.
like
It's that is also a trope in itself that has been used like so many times, and it can
it
be just
has.
it can be like it can pull you out of the story before it even starts because we've like come to recognize it, and if, as soon as you see the hint of it, you're like, oh, I know where this is gonna go.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mean, I will be honest. Um, I want to give people more credit
Mhm.
than that. I think two gay guys can just be friends.
Mhm.
A straight man
Oh,
and a straight woman
absolutely.
can just be friends.
Yeah.
And that was something I wasn't seeing a lot of, and it was like, what, I really want that in this series. Um,
Yeah, there has been that is an interesting take because there has been so much focus on like romantic relationships in the genre lately, where it's like you can't forget about the non-romantic relationships
yeah,
because everybody has them in real life. No matter
yeah. I
who
mean,
you are, you have
you have
to.
more non-romantic relationships, or at least most people do. No
Yeah,
judgment. You know,
yeah.
most people have more non-romantic relationships than romantic ones. So that was part of what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that my series wasn't just everybody is one thing.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, there's lots
it's
of ways to
not
have
all white
diversity.
women running around saving the city. It's not. Um, and the city is made up of a variety of people. When I started writing it, I was actually living in an area that was primarily African American, and I am not African American.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like, I don't see nearly enough people of color in all these fantasy novels I've been reading.
Hmm.
So I'm going to make sure that my books more accurately reflect what the area is made up of.
Hmm.
So, like, Zeta is Hispanic. Um, Andy is half Native American. Um, they have a few um, I'll call them like second tier NPCs because Win and Andy and Zeta's love interest are like first tier NPCs, and then you get the second tier where they're recurring characters, I guess.
Yeah, they're like
They're the
the
rest of
guest
the bridge crew
stars.
after you get past Kirk and Spock and McCoy.
Hmm.
You know, the rest of the bridge crew.
Hmm.
I've got people of color. You
Hmm.
know, Win is in fact not straight. Um, but I tried to, I've got old people or older people. I've got younger people. It's not all, everybody's the same age,
Hmm.
mysteriously good looking,
Yeah, it's not a
and all the
school.
same thing. You know, my leads are all relatively fit people close to 30. Um, that's where I'm fitting the tropes because that's a big superhero thing. That superheroes are these fit people, but they're very different types of fit. Um,
Yes.
Win is not into strenuous exercise.
Hmm.
Zeta is.
Yeah.
Andy's at a happy medium. You know, um, but not everybody in the series is thin. Not everybody in the series is short or tall or whatever. And
Hmm.
that was one of the things. Is I'm like, I want to make these people actually look like I would expect to see. We got a condo complex here. We're not going to just have hip young people all living together because that
Yeah.
is like no condo complex I have ever lived in. You got the couple that argues. You got the elderly lady with her dogs that she can never keep control of. You've got um, just a variety of people. So that was one of the things the things I took from a number of sources where I was like, this is one of the tropes I don't want to follow.
Hmm.
I want to make this look like a real world, not just part of it. Um,
Yes. Because it also adds like more opportunity for like drama to happen and tension to happen for various
Yeah.
parts of your setting where it's when everyone is not exactly the same. It's like, yeah, of course, some characters going to be like, oh boy, you did that again, or like, which in my real life, I have people say that to me, like, really, you really left that stack of dishes yet again. What have
Hmm.
I come to expect? And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I said, the old lady who doesn't control her little dogs very
Mhm.
well, I have that.
Yeah.
That's an actual character who comes up in a couple books. Um, but yeah, it's like gotta gotta keep it real, you know.
Yes. So my next question for you, it might be a tricky one to answer without spoiling anything, and I guess you could do like generality. Other people have done generalities, or they've hinted at it's in this particular book number. But do you have um, a plot line or a plot twist that you have come up with that either surprised you or you were like particularly like, yes, this I pulled this off.
Um, Zeta has a very, very, very slow burn romance,
Okay.
and I can say that without spoiling much. Um, that I'm pretty fond of. One of the things in urban fantasy when I was looking at it was all these people who were like, "Hi, how do you do? I am Hawk. I'm pleased to meet you, Eldara. We're mates."
Oh
I was like,
yes, that
okay,
happens.
I read romances. I'm cool with that happening sometimes, but not every time.
Mhm,
And sometimes people have a lot of issues they have to get over first, and Zeta's one of them.
mhm.
I
Yes.
mean, you don't just magically become good with other people and in a good spot for a relationship just because you meet hunky McHunk pants.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you might meet him, but if you're not in the right spot for it, you might be out of my way, dude. I'm chasing this person.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm pretty pleased with how that turned out. Um, I like I like my own work really. So I like where most of the plots are going. I haven't had one where I'm like I'm really disappointed, but that's the way it had to go.
Mhm.
I mean, there are individual scenes where I feel a little bit that way, generally because they're the sort of thing where my beta readers were like, Karen, um, this fight scene is a little too, what is it, wushu? You know, we've got like 5 kicks from this person, and this person hasn't done anything, and they would be in midair for how long before they touch ground again? Yeah, so there's a couple where I'm like, but it looks so cool in my head,
Oh, of course.
you know. But so there are a couple scenes where I was mildly okay. I'll take it down.
Mhm.
I'll make the fight scene work and be more reasonable. Oh my gosh, my own restrictions are hampering me again. I am such a slave driver.
That is the fun part, I think, of choosing novels as like an artistic medium is like there really is nothing holding you back except for your own vision. And it's
Yeah,
like you can go so over the top with it, and sometimes it really does work. Other times it's like, oh, this was really just because I have always wanted to see this. And
yeah,
the test audience is like, you know what? Whoa. Like, you
yeah,
really you can get away with this in like chop down 2 pages into 2 paragraphs. Oh, okay, I guess, but I'll just save that clipping on the side for myself.
yeah. I have a couple of cutscenes that I actually posted on my website,
Mhm.
where it was like, well, I'll pull these out because technically they don't add that much and they slow things down a little bit, but they're still kind of cool.
Yeah, I always wonder if there's like a way. I mean, I guess if it comes down to like if people really were that curious, and I think only a couple big name authors have done this, where it's like, yeah, like the not doing like an extended cut, but doing like a here's an extended chapter at the end if you really wanted way more of this, like
Yeah,
special
a number
content.
of bigger authors do that. Lindsay Burrow-Care has been doing a bit of it lately.
Oh, really? Yeah.
She's been doing. Yeah, I'm a fan of hers, and she also gives very practical writing advice.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, she's had a. I feel like I don't know, maybe she's had like a couple of podcasts over the years, but I feel like I've watched a bunch of like from a while ago though. But
yeah,
very, very, very savvy.
yes, and she is at a different spot in her writing career than I am. But I have noticed that she has been doing a number of here's another viewpoint of this
Oh,
scene.
okay.
Here's where this character got that item that he popped up with in a later scene. I mean, she just sent something like that out like a week or two ago. And you're also seeing things like that from Ilona Andrews and, oh God, the Huntress series ladies, Janine Frost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she did a whole bunch of. I don't know if you're familiar with her series, but she has the like Night Huntress, I think it is, which was her original Vampire Hunter series, and
I have some friends that have read those and they like have pushed them towards me before, but I have never actually like
well,
dove
you can
in.
tell your friends that on her website she had some chapters from the male love interest point of view,
Ooh.
from like I think it was the first book, and they're pretty good. I mean, you get a lot more. They're more romancy.
Mhm.
Um, Romance was a big part of those books, and you get a better idea because you're actually seeing, okay, he's not just being a jerk here. He's trying to do this, and he's also trying to, not take advantage of this woman that he is attracted to, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So she's actually got some of those up on her website, and it's something I've seen a number of authors doing, and I appreciate as a reader. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I can't use some of these cutscenes, and definitely some of the fight scenes will never see the light of day. However cool they were originally, um, they're still pretty interesting in my mind.
Mhm.
But some of those at least will make their way to my website because I think, like I said, I enjoy them. I see these other authors doing it, um, so I think it's a fun thing, and a way to give the reader something while they're waiting for the next book. I'm a slow release
Mhm.
right now, in part because my writing time is very limited right now. Generally, it's
Yes.
after everybody goes to bed, maybe an hour or two in the afternoons where I can reply to email and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but it's something that you can give the readers. And here's a short story that covers X event that's only referenced. Because you do have all these moving pieces who are doing their own thing.
Mhm.
Um, at least most of the good writers do, um, other than the main character in any good story.
Mhm.
The villain is theoretically not just sitting there going, well, I need to wait for heroine to make her big realization, get some nookie with her love interest, and have a coffee with her friends to discuss how she's going to defeat me, and then I'll go for the last crystal of bamboozlement. You know, um, no, the behind the scenes, the villain is doing whatever the villain is doing. Theoretically, love interest is not just hanging out waiting for her to come back. He's actually ruling that kingdom that he's a prince of. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
Um,
it's a job. It's lots of stuff.
yes, we should raise taxes on this in order to pay for that. And we'll, okay, roads or education. Can we combine the two and train the kids to fix the roads? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that kind of story could be a lot of fun. And I've totally gotten off topic again. Sorry.
It's okay. My I got only a couple more questions left. So um, this next one is uh, I know you mentioned you're currently working on book 6 and you do have uh, a bunch more planned. Um, for any readers that have read up to your current book, do you have any sort of like tease or hint of something they might expect in future installments?
Well, Toga was primarily a portal fantasy. Um, so my book 6, which I recently announced to my newsletter list, is named Party.
Okay.
Party is going to deal with a very standard superhero trope back in the
Ooh.
real world. Something that
Okay.
comes up a lot in many popular superhero franchises, especially the X-Men and Avengers.
Oh, okay.
But it's not lights from the sky.
Okay. It's
It's not
not
giant
a
lights from the sky.
it's
We're
not
not
a
doing that one.
not a sky beam or whatever it's
No,
called.
not a sky beam right now. I'm not ruling out a sky beam in the future, which I would probably play for giggles. Like, well, what are they doing? Is that like a new club
There's
or something?
there's a sky
Um,
beam.
but I can say that is going to be something that gets covered in Party, and then after Party, after Party.
Ooh.
I can't actually call book 7 that. Book 7, they're going to have to go back and pick up some of the pieces that were
Oh,
left behind in Toga.
okay.
Because there's a plot line that I deliberately left dangling. I did not forget about it in Toga. And she's going to have to handle the stuff in Party and then get right on the stuff that she didn't finish in Toga for book 7. So
So
there you
she'll
go.
she'll be busy for
She'll
the
be
foreseeable
busy.
future.
She's a busy girl. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. Um, there's a number of explosions.
Mhm.
Trying not to repeat the same type of explosions. So probably not a helicopter or a hospital exploding. And
Okay.
I probably won't set another nightclub on fire. But but yeah, I think I can say that pretty clearly without spoiling too much.
Nice. So there you have it, listeners. If you're waiting with bated breath, go back through, use your highlight feature in your Kindles or outline in your paperbacks, and try to figure out what's going to happen. That's what also that's one thing that I am fascinated with. This is not on my script, but I included this question mainly. I don't think a lot of indie writers um, they tease in their books, but I'm such a junkie on. I love looking at threads of people theorizing for things and like this could possibly happen because we read this in this book and then this all ties together and I just love the teases of like sometimes my favorite authors will do an interview and I'm like desperately waiting for a new book and they'll say, well, just to, give you something to chew on for a little bit, you might see more of this character. And I'm immediately like, oh my gosh, I have to go and look at every single thing from that last book and figure out where they might be. So I love all
I
that
can
sort of
I
stuff.
can also say that Jerome St. George plays a much larger role in Party, since he was
Okay.
almost entirely missing in Toga, and
Oh.
people will get to learn more about the woman known only as Dream Auntie.
Ooh, okay. There's a little bit extra.
Yeah, I normally save the tidbits like that for my newsletter folks, but I will drop those two since you mentioned people and characters, and I did have someone inquiring about Jerome, a
Ooh,
reader, sent me an email going, "Is he going to be in the next one?"
yeah.
So,
Like, there's uh, nothing more scary as a reader to be like, wait, where is that person? Please tell me they're not gone.
yep, nope. Jerome has a pretty good sized role to play in Party, and Dream Auntie will. You'll find out more about her.
Very good.
Ta-ta!
There you go. Uh, so I guess of my last question really isn't much of a question. It's more of like a wrap up. But is there any other thing besides telling people where they can find your work that you would like to mention?
Um, I'd love to just tell people where to find my work, and I am generally pretty open to reader emails. I usually reply, assuming that the email isn't something like "I hate you, you're terrible." Um,
People, come on, use your energy more wisely.
yeah, seriously. Send an admiration email to some author you do like.
Mhm.
Don't send hate mail. I don't. At least I haven't up until now. Knock on wood. Received a lot of hate mail, but I do enjoy hearing from my readers. Um, they can learn more about my books and stuff on www.karendiem.com. They can also sign up for my newsletter there, and my newsletter peeps get a whole bunch of short stories. Last year, I think they got two or three. This year, there will be at least, I would say, probably two. This year, maybe three, depending on how whether or not I get accepted into a certain anthology.
Okay.
Uh, and they will definitely be getting a look at the cover for the book for the party cover, um, August or September, I think. So they'll see it like months before other people will. I am relatively active on Twitter, a little less so recently because there's been a lot of important stuff going on, and I don't think they necessarily need me joking around all the time with all that going on. But I'm happy to chat with people on Twitter. I have a Facebook page, and I have a Pinterest page where I pin stuff like recipes I think Zeta would like, literary jokes Win would like, um, science and geek jokes that Andy likes, and just, superhero stuff I think is cool, or other things that I'm a fangirl of, you know.
Nice.
So people can find me all those places. My website has all the info on where to find me. And of course, I am wide, so my books are available on Kobo and Amazon, iBooks, etc. And now available in paperback
Ooh,
for all of my
excellent.
existing 5 books. The
The
paperback,
paper.
the Toga paperback just went up like a week or two ago. So I'm like, okay, the paperbacks are up. I put a lot of work into getting those paperbacks up. There
Mhm.
were a lot of delays in getting them up, and there was a typo that I caught at the last minute, and then I had to
Oh my
reload everything.
gosh.
And,
That's always the
so
worst thing.
somebody buy one of my paperbacks so I feel justified. You
Yes,
know,
definitely. Um, as somebody who also has paperbacks, and I haven't done them for my latest ones, I sympathize with the finding a typo. It's like it's always the random one page that you flip to, and you're like, really? I feel like I've read this like 10 times.
well, I figured out um, that what had happened is my proofreader caught a typo
Mhm.
where I was inconsistently spelling the word eyeing.
Oh, okay.
So I did, mea culpa, a search and replace on every instance of
Mm.
eyeing, which messed up surveying.
Oh no.
And
Oh,
another
geez.
word that I'm currently blanking on. And there were only a couple instances of those other words in there, but yeah, those got corrected. The ebooks were also corrected for those of you who are like, I don't like typos in my books.
Mhm.
I don't like typos in my books either. So the ebooks got corrected as soon as I was like, oh, I must fix the paperbacks and the ebooks. Now
Yep.
I must upload everywhere. Oh god,
Yes.
Smashwords needs its own file. Yeah.
Mm. Yes. Oh my
So,
goodness.
um, but yeah, good luck with the paperbacks.
Mhm.
Ingram Spark's got some of those good codes out right now. If you do Ingram Spark, if you're
Ooh.
all KDP, then KDP's KDP. They're not making
Yes.
you wait 3 weeks at least,
Oh boy.
but they were around 72 hours approving one of my um, manuscripts because
Oh my
they'll
gosh.
leave the old one on sale while they put it through the review process. So I uploaded my change as soon as possible, and then they're like, "It has to be reviewed." I changed
Yeah, it
one
still takes
word.
time. Yeah, it still takes like a good like day at least for something to go
Yeah,
through.
yeah. It took them like 72 hours or more, but
Wow.
not more than 1 week, uh, because I had my Ingram Spark all approved. Ingram Spark like got back to me like the next day or so with their approval process, and they're like, "Yep, you're good to go. Your book's for sale."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Well, I'm just waiting for Amazon to approve the last manuscript so I can upload this new manuscript, which fixes the other typo where I accidentally introduced the error." Um, yeah. So good luck with that.
There we go. Well, before I wrap it all up, I just want to thank you very much for taking the time and being on the show because I had a great time chatting.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it was a lot of fun.
I'm glad
Next
to.
time, though, you've got to answer more of the questions for yourself, though.
I know, so I'm gonna. I do plan, and this may happen in a month or two.
Hmm.
I am planning on doing a like flip episode where I will be on the answering side, hopefully, and I'll have somebody doing the interviewing for me, so I'll be in the hot seat. So we will see how it goes.
Alrighty.
But yeah, so just to close it up for all the listeners, I want to say thank you very much for listening, and just want to remind you that whether you watch this on YouTube or listen to it on your favorite podcasting site, just please make sure you subscribe, and if you can, hit a bell for notifications, just so that you don't miss any future episodes. They usually air on Friday mornings. If you are viewing this somewhere where you're able to comment, please feel free to do so. If you talk about the books, please just try to keep it spoiler free for people who haven't read, or give a spoiler warning if you mention something especially spoilerific.
Keep
Um,
our secrets between us.
yes, it's only meant to come when you get to it, and then after that, it's a secret between you and everyone who has made it to that point. So as always, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate you all, whether you're new or old to the podcast, and I will see you all next time.